So at the last meeting, we had some questions arise regarding how impact fees are used in relation to capital projects. And Michael Walters Young, who leads our budget and performance team, has put together a presentation to start us off. Then we'll review the options that have come up in our various discussions, and then the NIOP group has provided several other options that we'll try to jump into today, and that should bring us to closure at the end of the meeting. So, Michael, how you doing?
Darn glad to meet you. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I have to be enthusiastic because I'm not a morning person. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Walters Young. I serve as the Chief Budget and Performance Officer for the City of Franklin, and like several of you in this room, also a member of the Development Services Advisory Commission. So at our last meeting, we talked about, there were several questions raised about how much money has been collected, what is it used for, how much has been spent, and what are the plans for, or how the road impact fee is going to be used in the future. I am obligated as the son of a historian to start at the beginning because it's such a wonderful place to start, but we need to know where we've been to know where we're going. So as you can see on the screen, this is the first couple of sentences that are in the Road Impact Fund budget for the City of Franklin. This ordinance dates back to 1988, 88-13, and as you all know, it is paid on the proceeds from new development and used to improve arterial and collector roadways and add capacity to those roadways. Since its inception in 1988, there were no payments in 1980, fiscal 88. Keep in mind, of course, that we have a July 1 through June 30th fiscal year here. So all of these references for fiscal years will be in that time frame. Starting actually in fiscal 89, the City of Franklin, Tennessee has collected $115,361,786 through June 30th, 2024. I'm also obligated to say that number is unaudited because it is the year-end estimate for how we ended inclusive of fiscal 24. How much has been spent? $91,185,749, asterisk, also unaudited 2024 expenditures. The audit will be presented at the joint November-December Budget and Finance Committee meeting, usually in the first week of December. Now, of that $91,185,749, you can really think about how it's been spent in three buckets. Number one are direct reimbursements via offset agreements of roughly $8.3 million. Note, that only appears in our financials from fiscal 2016 onward because that is how we began to budget it. Prior to fiscal 2016, offset agreements were certainly executed and paid, but they were a net revenue. So it decreased the amount of revenue shown and was not shown as a separate expense. So this is really the offset agreements that have been repaid through fiscal 24 from fiscal 2016. Second, $26.3 million is direct cash funding of projects from the Road Impact Fund, either directly charged to the fund or, like we try to do now with all of our capital projects except for water and sewer, a transfer to the Capital Projects Fund. And third is servicing of debt, also project funding. It's just that this is a transfer to the Debt Service Fund, and that totals $56.6 million. What has that really gone and paid for? Well, the majority of it, as you saw, goes to the city's Debt Service Fund for various road projects. And the projects which were partially or majority funded through the road impact fees are including but not necessarily limited to Baker's Bridge, Carruthers Parkway, Hillsborough Phase 1, the widening, Mack Hatcher Parkway design, McEwen Phases 2 and 3, Royal Oaks, and South Carruthers. There are other smaller projects, and after this meeting, we're going to produce 2 items. You'll get this PowerPoint. We'll send that out to the group. And in the packets for the August 27th meeting is a more detailed description of where all these numbers come from, inclusive of all revenues and expenses going back to the inception of the fund in 1988. Huge thanks to our finance team being able to do that. I note this number. There's still $22 million of debt service outstanding against this fund through fiscal 2033. So as you look at the remaining slides, when I talk about the capital improvement plan and how much money we estimate we're going to take from road impact fees to build capital projects in the community, if you go down into the packet, you're going to see that we don't forecast any additional road impact fees being generated in the next 9 years. Now, logically, that should leave you scratching your head because you're paying them. But what we've done, at least for the next couple of years, while we still have this very large debt service balance that has to be paid, is we assume that the balance that have been collected thus far is available to fund. And once this gets paid off a little more, we will start recognizing from a financing strategy additional road impact fees that come in, regardless of what the board chooses to do with them on September 10th. If they change, we will revise this financial model and obviously recognize the potential for additional revenues to finance the CIP. So, how big is this plan? The adopted capital improvement plan for the city of Franklin, Tennessee totals $482 million worth of expenses. No, you're not expected to see all of this pie chart, but it does break out every single revenue source that goes to finance the nearly $500 million of adopted capital projects, of which you'll note that impact fees as a whole, road impact, parkland, city facilities, and county facilities, total $96.7 million of that $482 million. And road impact fees by themselves total just under $30 million. To look at it a different way, external funding, grants, money from other local governments. Biggest one there, if you think about it, is McEwen Phase 5. Brentwood actually is paying the slight majority of that project. We are paying a large minority amount of that project. So we count that as the total project, but we recognize Brentwood's contribution. Impact fees, road impact, parkland dedication, city facilities, and county facilities account for 20% of this financing plan. And the balance, or 65%, comes from taxpayer or ratepayer funded sources. So that's going to be property taxes or general fund cash, whether it be cash payments or what we convert into debt, still backed up by the taxes, hotel motel taxes, and any other fees that may come around is about that. I should note, this does not, except for the small portions that are attributable to the capital improvement projects which the board has approved, this does not include any water or sewer impact fees. Those are accounted for separately, and in our world, we think of them separately. The development community is still paying for them, but that's a different presentation, just to be clear. This includes about $8 million of that $482 million coming from water and sewer revenues, because it's for a piece of that road improvement or a piece of that park that may end up benefiting the water and sewer system. But it's a very, very small amount and should not be confused with the larger issue of water and sewer impact fees. Finally, what projects are funded in the CIP? And again, I apologize for how small this is. I think June was the last time we gave an update on the CIP. So what we have tried to do is to do a color coding of where projects are. Green, if you remember Ghostbusters, the light is green and the trap is clean. Green is done. Yellow is in progress. Red is in design, what we labeled committed, and dark red is sort of design uncommitted. This is when we were trying to evaluate what projects we wanted to keep on the plan or not. So you will see that there is one project which was funded through road impact fees. That was the McEwen Drive interchange modifications, where we added a lane in order to go southbound on 65. East McEwen Drive, Phase 4, and Jordan Road are at various stages of process and progress. Paul can elaborate or choose not to elaborate on those projects. Long Lane and East McEwen Drive, that would be Phase 5, are also in design. And then Mallory, North Royal Oaks, Liberty, Church Street, and Paytonsville Road are in very early stages of design. Please note, Church Street is italicized. We're going to go back and we're going to take a look at the availability and applicability of road impact fees for finance that project, because even though it's necessary to upgrade the road and the stormwater and other utilities that are with it, whether or not that adds any capacity is a serious question. So that's why that's italicized. This doesn't mean that $12 million goes away, obviously. It will be taken and put towards other projects where it is applicable. But I wanted to admit that and say that as we looked through it, we're like, perhaps this should not be financed in this way. It's a lot of information, hopefully, and some charts that are easy to understand. I'm happy to stand, literally, for any questions you may have. And as I said, we will get you this information so you have it with you. It will be in the board's packets for work session on Tuesday night.
Michael, those
Sir.
are funded CIP.
That
I
is,
think, and everybody, I should have mentioned earlier, it's been asked to record this meeting, so the microphone is right there. If you'd like to move to the stand.
Those were funded.
I think it's on.
About to start singing. It's not. Yeah. Those are funded, but there is a list. I think if I'm sitting in the shoes of this community, but there are others that are unfunded.
correct.
That we cannot. We don't have the funding capacity to do. That list also might be helpful, I think, for the group to see maybe not right now, but what the unfunded CIP road projects are that we're not able to do in the current financial model.
It should be noted, a little bit of foreshadowing
Hang on,
for the
Mike.
board. Very soon, we'll be distributing actually that list back to you with the $85 million in capacity that you freed up in June, and then ask you for reprioritization of additional opportunities and beyond. So that will be occurring in the next while. Well,
Tuesday or the next meeting?
either Tuesday or the next meeting. We'll get that out to you very shortly. Any other questions for the numbers? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Yeah, if you can plug that in for me, please. So what we have before us now for the aldermen to consider, and again, we're going to talk during the work session on Tuesday the 27th, is Ordinance 2003 41 that has the two options for implementing the updated fees, a 2-year and 3-year option. We discussed those previously. I've included an ordinance in the email, and I don't think we should spend our time on reviewing that. The other 3 options that will be shared will be one that was brought forward that fees should be assessed at the time of a pre-application meeting. And I won't get into the merits of that because not all projects require a pre-application meeting unless it's a planned development. You still have a myriad of other projects. The second option was assessing the fees when a project becomes vested in accordance with the state vesting law that went into effect in 2015. Essentially meaning that when a project became entitled, vested, that fee for a single-phase project would be in effect for up to 5 years, multi-phase for up to 15 years. And then the third option that we had discussed last year that has merit to bringing forth is that the city would commit going forward to publishing a road impact fee schedule for at least 3 years forward, so that when a development or a client and design team are looking to do a project and doing their due diligence, they would see what those fees are. It would be then populated every additional year based on the National Highway Construction Index. And that would be a more predictable way to see what the fees will be. And then also it was discussed along with that proposal that large multifamily commercial projects, when it was time to obtain a building permit, when fees are currently collected, that for the impact fees, a percentage to be determined would be collected at the time of permitting, and then the balance would be collected prior to requesting any final inspections that lead to a certificate of occupancy. So those are the proposals that'll be presented to the aldermen. Now, Rachel and the NIOP group had shared on Monday evening a proposal, and we'll go through those at this time and invite you to ask questions and either jump up and speak into the mic so we can share this as needed once we're done with this meeting. And I'll try to just briefly state what I've read, and I know I'll be corrected if I'm not stating it correctly. But so to get into the conversation, the first proposal is grandfathering. This is for projects that have already been entitled, whether they were pre-vesting legislation 2015 or vested. So any project that's already been entitled would fall under the grandfathering. That's the first piece, and I'm going to ask you to hold a second. The second part of this that comes into play is that there's also a caveat to it that any modification to an existing development plan for these projects that don't add additional vehicular traffic would still be grandfathered if the Board of Mayor and Aldermen approve it. Now, that may not be possible because without modifying our zoning ordinance and the triggers that require development plans. Remember, we're dealing with state law to try to identify when impact fees are assessed. And I'll give you one example. I don't want to dive into it if it's okay. But if a project's entitled and you have a fast food restaurant of sorts that requires so many vehicular trips, what I'm reading at a glance here that needs to be vetted further, that if a developer wants to build multifamily houses, as long as it don't add additional traffic, that they could do that without a development plan. Because once the development plan comes into effect, it affects the vesting legislation that requires a re-entitlement of the project if that's the scenario. Again, that's a more complicated piece that I would ask us to put a pin in that. And let's talk about the reality of grandfathering and the impact on our community based on some of the presentation Michael made about funding our infrastructure. I'm opening it up for conversation of the merits of grandfathering existing projects.
Question, what triggers, like you said, additional, like homes would be added or something? What is the threshold? What triggers that, though? Do we have a level that triggers that, or capacity for increasing capacity? I mean, when
If I understand your question, and I know our our planning team is here. In our zoning ordinance, we have certain triggers of changing uses, changing the road network, and some other triggers, I'll call them, that would need to be reevaluated in our zoning ordinance to see whether some projects can be for by right or not. I don't want to dive any deeper unless you want to.
Well, I just want to make sure that we have, or if we do need to adjust those, or do we have, is that plainly stated in our ordinances that what those triggers are?
Yes.
Currently?
The zoning ordinance under procedures.
Yeah,
So
and,
for development plans, it's at the end of that chapter about what triggers a planning level, planning commission
Right.
level review, and then what triggers a development plan.
sure that we have them, but are they sufficient enough to deal with everything we're working on here?
Well, and that would be a deeper conversation. I'm trying to, if I could, hone in on the grandfathering, because this is a big deal. And we did some modeling of existing projects based on the fee, if we look back 5 years, based on the fees that were paid on the existing ordinance versus what would be paid on the new ordinance. And if you want me to have your colleagues talk about it, we can.
Without
Right.
digging in too deeply and getting too, what if scenario, would the grandfathering be at risk if the use intensified? So if you had approved it for that fast food restaurant and reduced the intensity down to a neighborhood, perhaps, would the balance be grandfathered at the higher level, or would it adjust down? Because I see the risk for the development community here is you transitioning from a lower use to a higher use and being subject to the higher fee. But if the fee decreased or the use decreased, would we go back and restart the clock? Or is it only in a scenario where the use increases?
So,
I'm not sure if, Amy, am I asking the right question here?
right here, Amy, go ahead.
I'll just grab yours, Greg, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a question for the board of mayor and aldermen to decide what you put into your resolution about fees and when they get assessed and how they get reassessed. That's a question for you. I think we want to be careful about tying it to vesting because fees don't vest. You can write your resolution to say they're assessed at a certain time and reassessed, but fees don't vest. There's been at least one case where someone said, well, we don't have to pay higher fees because of the timing of when you upped the fees. And then the courts did say, no, you do have to pay higher fees. Fees do not vest. That's not part of vesting legislation because vesting legislation is about the construction rules at the time, the construction rules, not fees and things like that. Does that make sense?
So could we put, does that make sense?
Yeah, that's excellent.
I understand though what they're trying to get at here, and so if we didn't change the zoning ordinance or you didn't want to modify that, but our fee resolution, we could have different triggers and dates and times. So you could line up the fee increase at like the milestones of the vesting? So for instance, it's approved at a certain fee, and then we have milestones every 3 years, right? Is that, could you, grandfathering the existing and I think moving forward are probably two separate issues. But is this speaking about existing projects grandfathering, or is this talking about how they're going to grandfather things in projects moving forward?
No, you can grab it. What I'm reading this as is that we have projects that already have been entitled. Some of the projects have been approved back in 2000. They're still under development. That's saying that the fee today would apply until it comes to fruition. So there is no timeline. It's indefinite. A project could be going on for another 20 or 30 years. They would pay the fee that's in effect today, which is already dated. So that if that's the direction, then what we want to try to glean on the 27th is how do we administer something? and we'd work with the Development Services Advisory Commission and our team to execute. And so just think of it in those terms, because as Amy said, and she's right on point, I know you're trying to look at vesting as a particular indicator or a milestone tool, but if the goal is to grandfather projects that have already been entitled, that haven't come to fruition for an indefinite period of time, then that's the direction we want, and then we'll figure out how to implement that.
Can we clarify that that's what they mean? That it's weird that we're saying what the proposal is.
Yeah,
The folks who wrote the proposal in the room. So tell us, is that indefinite? Like a vesting plan can be 15 years. You want us to hold the fee for 15 years?
That's
Well, let's have them answer.
all right.
I think, the spirit of what we're trying to do is say, can we make implementing fees predictable for the development community? And however that needs to be written into a resolution, we can work those details out. It's, no one is trying to argue that the city doesn't need funding and that development doesn't want to be a part of funding their own, improvements needed. It's how it hits and when it hits. And sometimes, a January 1st or a July 1st of the next year does not line up when projects need to be, when they've already made certain plans and had financing in place. So what we're trying to do now and for the future is prevent that throttle of, I already have everything set to go, moving dirt, and now I'm trying to scramble and figure out how to pay an additional $30 million. And
So, but that concept. But specifically what this says, or seems to say, is it would go with vesting, which could be, the term was used indefinite, but, some of the legislation is around 15 years. Is that really what because we put things on the table that said we would have fees set for, a 3-year window, certainty, or an indexing that is capped at a certain percentage to get at the very point that you're talking about, which is predictability, and what the cost is going to be in a reasonable window of time.
yeah, Eric, if
I would argue 15 years might not be a reasonable period of time. To say that cost never changes in 15 years, roads aren't going to cost the same to build in 15 years, obviously. So is there a middle ground that is not indefinite or 15 years versus a 3-year window or something like that might be some balance of that?
yeah, I think to answer your question, a lot of us had a lot of joint conversations in order to help produce this language. Some of us more familiar with the processes within Franklin than others. I do think what you are hitting on is what the intent of this language was set up to mean, which is for projects that are already entitled. There is don't disagree with what Rachel was saying with regard to the predictability. Jumping 300% is not predictable. And in some cases, we have land that is now worthless based on the impact fee raise of this, what is being proposed. So projects that may have been underwritten, we have an example at some of our projects. This fee structure alone will raise costs $41 million in 2 projects. I really don't want to go back to a Tyler Berry and say your land is now worthless because the fees have increased overnight by 300%. So from a grandfathering standpoint, what we are looking at what we are suggesting is following the milestones in a project. So if you have projects, and I don't know if these guys are in the room, but projects like an Avalon that have been approved for multiple years and may be getting ready to expire, I don't know if a project like that has an approved site plan. So there are milestones where that would expire beyond or before the 15-year horizon. So I don't think we're sitting there saying, hey, this is going to be, by adopting this, you're automatically extending it 15 years. We want to incorporate those milestones with the program that would cause these intermediate projects to roll off, if you will, if they haven't met the various hurdles. one of the other things that you could conceivably look in this is, has the project also started some form of construction? So it's one thing to have a development plan, a site plan, but then if you've been sitting on that, that could be another trigger that you potentially incorporate. But the gist of this is to say, how do you protect projects that in some cases have started construction, have financing, from the having this may not be the correct legal term, but a taking to all of a sudden have this value increase overnight by some exponential component. I think moving forward, and it's kind of spelled out in 2 A, B, C, D, or whatever it is we completely agree with the processes that Vernon and his team have laid out for projects going forward. I think the big problem is with these projects that are in some cases underway, and there's just this ginormous change in cost.
Predictability the other way, question for Rachel or Adam or whoever. What about a project that comes in for a vesting extension? That would suggest a change and an unpredictability to the city about what we were expecting those fees to be on that project. Does that reset for the city to reassess to?
We haven't addressed that in this request. I think it'd be up to BOMA to say, do you even approve that or not, right? Like you have to.
You need to talk.
Sorry, to answer that question, that's not addressed in this proposal. With the thought that if it comes before BOMA, you will have the prerogative of choosing yes or no to extend that entitlement. No would be an easy vote to catch up the fees. But I think that would be a question that you all should answer with regard to, is that a consideration of, you may say yes, but then it recalibrates the fees to the current level. That was not addressed in this proposal.
Adam, if I could use the Ream Fleming track on the east side of the interstate where Ramsey EMF Aetna is located, that was entitled prior to vesting. And when I read that and talk about grandfathering projects that have a development plan, it was a concept plan at the time, and it's an approved site plan, that when I read that literally, and what I'm seeing is that the fees in effect today would apply to the remainder of those entitlements in that 150-acre tract.
Yes, based on this presentation.
All right.
Based on some information that we received back from the long-range planning team yesterday, the staff does an awesome job at calibrating the, I don't know if anybody's in here on that long-range team, but your development report that you issue annually is fantastic. It does not really address a takedown chart, if you will, of commercial like it does residential. So there are annual commercial permits that are shown on that, but it doesn't calibrate it back to say, oh, well, there's this much remaining or something like that. I understand there's a presentation that Andrew's put together that may be on the work session for next week, but in the information that he sent back yesterday, and Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there are only 2 projects that were identified on this list that are pre-vesting legislation, and they were Ovation and Reams Fleming. Everything else had been caught up to the current vesting legislation. So I think those would be the 2 projects, at least in the information we received back from planning staff yesterday, that are in the scenario that you're talking about, Vernon. So this isn't a scenario of like 80 projects across the city. I think there's 2.
I want to avoid getting into scenarios. That's the charge that I mentioned, that if the aldermen are inclined to look at this in some form or fashion, that staff will go back and evaluate it, because there are a lot of planned developments in our community in which somebody, I would just, as a very simple illustration, maybe have bought lots in neighborhoods that are sitting on them. They were entitled years ago, so when they come in to get a permit, what fees do we apply to it? Because it's grandfathered, if that's the direction we go. And I know there are a lot of neighborhoods that have lots, and I'm commercial, again, we haven't tracked the takedown. That adds a little bit of complexity, but that's just an example.
You're doing a great job, Bev. That's not in your typical alderman description, but well, I'm choking on grandfathering, and I'm sorry. You know, we deal a lot with the state as far as trying to get road projects done. They've approved 70-something odd projects for the next 10 years. And then there's 700 and something projects that didn't even get the light of day. And then we have this long list of city projects that we need to be doing. So ultimately, where's all this money coming from? Well, it's going to ultimately, if this happens, going to be coming from our taxpayers. Even though I know taxpayers number one is traffic and transportation. I'm all over the predictability of whatever we're going to do. And we've worked very, very hard for 10, 12 years at least trying to make things predictable for developers. And this is another one where I agree we need some predictability moving forward. But a road doesn't cost what it did last year or the year before that. We have to attack this with great vigor and aggressively to solve our transportation problems, which is the number one concern of our citizens.
One thing, so to Adam's point, I think taking out the two projects, which you're right on this list that the city generated, and taking out, if we take out those two projects for pre-vesting, but we have all these residential projects that units haven't been taken down. Like take those two kind of scenarios, the residential units that have not been taken down, and Ovation and Ream slimming out. Everything else, which are these other projects, I don't know why we couldn't apply a fee, like the new fee at every milestone. For the ones that exist, work our way out of these 20 or 30. So give them their full 3-year period since they were entitled, or the next vesting milestone in this column, that fee would reset, and that gives them the 3-year period of the current projects that have been entitled. We will set the fee at the new fee rate with inflation. Those 3 years, the inflation will take place. But they get 3 years to do it, and then it'll reset. And then we just look at these other circumstances. I feel like the pre-vesting and the neighborhood takedowns of new units that have not been taken down yet on pre-vesting developments. Like that's where we're getting gummed up on this grandfathering. The projects that have been approved since 2017 to 2024, which is in this middle section of the report, Senate. I feel like there's a pretty easy way to get that figured out. It's the two complicated pieces are the pre-vesting and the units that have not been taken down. And then I think we have a lot of tools. I told you we got the Parkland impact fee at West Haven, just did theirs. I feel like we have a lot of tools in our tool belt right now for some of these projects. It's maybe more policy driven. How are we going to take, like West Haven had like in the Parkland fee we just redid, or I don't know if we redid it, but we approved a new schedule and it was at number of lots taken down. It was a very specific. Now that's a big development. Like how do we take that kind of creativity? Clearly we already have those tools in our tool belt to do it. Now do we have the capacity or the infrastructure internally to do that on every single project? Probably not right now. But we have some of these tools to address what I think she's saying already. I don't know that we need to blanket grandfather everything. I think we have a lot of tools already. I think that this grandfathering, we might be able to help the two that have been pre-vested or pre-vesting with some of these, working with the tools we have already to get to a point where, why do we have to blanket say we grandfather Ream Slimming when we can probably come up with some sort of schedule that makes sense on those and not change our entire policy. We're doing it already on developments. I mean, I just saw the Parkland impact fee. We're already doing that. So why are we having to, seems like we need to set a policy, more broader policy on how we handle that internally and get creative to meet their specific needs rather than blanketing everything. But I'll have more time, I guess, at the Alderman meeting to speak. I'd like to.
I totally understand where you're headed with that. I would just advise maybe thinking about it a little differently than vesting milestones, because we really want to encourage developers to continue to hit those milestones as quickly as they can. So maybe thinking about it in number of years that you may want to have projects grandfathered might be a little more manageable for staff, because I feel like if you say when you hit your next milestone, then the new fees are going to be assessed, well, that may discourage someone from hitting the next milestone. So just a way to think about it maybe.
But the increased fee would encourage them to.
Say that again.
The increased fee, if you know that in 3 years you're going to have a 200% increase in your fee,
But they may hit the milestone, but we want them to actually.
Hold on. Here, say that again. They're trying to get this on.
So they have up to 3 years to hit the milestone, but it's better for everybody if they can hit it quicker. And so if that is what it's tied to.
Yeah, we can do anything. We just need that guidance of the day, take a deeper dive into it, and then try to avoid the minutia of administration. You know, we're looking for the guidance, and then we can come back. We're really good at coming up with solutions and ideas. And there may be costs to it. That's what the Development Services Advisory Commission comes up with. But you know, think in terms of time of a project that you want to apply, because then we can administer it, and it is predictable. So any more on the grandfathering piece? Adam?
Sure, Paul.
Go ahead.
Hi, I have a question maybe back from Michael based on the mayor's questions or comments.
Yeah.
Don't disagree with him that we're facing a lot of roadway hurdles. Am I understanding in your presentation correctly that of the $400 million CIP and the roads, obviously only a portion of the roadway networks that need improvement are in the CIP, that boiled down to maybe like 30 million out of 120 million that is being programmed from road impact fees to go towards those roads? And I may be off on the numbers, but if I understand your presentation right, the entirety of the road construction costs were not being borne by road impact fees. So if that is correct, as an example, Mayor, a single remaining project at Berry Farms is producing over $30 million in road impact fees. That is not including any other project in the city of Franklin. And if I'm following that math right, that alone would equal the number of dollars that are allocated towards the CIP from road impact fees. But I may be not understanding the math tracing correctly.
So, effectively, yes. So what we showed was that there's of the 8 projects which are approved in the CIP, voted on by the board, that are eligible or that we have identified as eligible for use of road impact fees, those total cost is $151 million, of which 29.9 is planned to come from road impact fees. When you budget the use of these fees, you have to keep those sort of 3 buckets in mind, though. We have commitments we've already made for those road projects which have added capacity in the past. We have an ongoing capital contribution for the projects that you see on the last slide. And then we always budget $3 million a year for offset agreements. That's it's a swag, admittedly, but if you perform and the agreement is there, we're obligated to make sure that those fees are available back to you and that we haven't gone and spent them. So there is this inherent built-in conservativeness that, yes, more impact fees are coming in than we are showing on the screen. But we have to do that to ensure that we meet all of your obligations.
Or those funds could turn into enhancing a roadway by your development, right by Reeves Fleming. That's capacity that builds out the network that's associated with your development. So just because it's not on the plan doesn't mean it can't be capacity that's usable. Yeah, it helps you with recapture.
Obviously, there's even more dollars coming in then if you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're saying the same thing, just I want to restate it a little bit differently, is that we have offset agreements that developers get to recapture when they add capacity to support their development. And if we grandfather the fees for projects, that means that the fees that are being collected won't reflect the true cost of that construction based on updated fees, which means the developer wouldn't be able to recapture those fees in total. Keeping the impact fees aligned with the true cost of construction is important for the offsets to work. And then it's, as we're thinking about looking at some legacy projects that may have agreements, those may need to be adjusted too. So I just came up. Oh, Alan.
Yeah, just real quickly on grandfathering. I think this is probably the most important topic when looking at all this. Because you'd mentioned you'd gone back 5 years and looked at fees compared to today. Look at everything 5 years ago compared to today. I mean, we went through an anomaly nationally, globally, labor pool, material costs, growth coming to this area, and it really turned everything upside down. But, when you're looking at this, the developers in the room, and a lot of projects that are on the table now, they're the ones that's going to be hit the hardest because they're having to absorb this big leap. In the future, I don't see us having these giant leaps like this. But in this case, and maybe this is not the right formula, but I would ask the aldermen and staff to consider what can we do? What is that middle ground that helps those developers that already have contracts, already have pro formas, already have agreements that they have to execute to, being able to get their projects off the ground. Some are already moving dirt. And I think for what it is, finding out a solution to this particular topic is very, very important for the right here and now. Thanks.
Glenn, I want to share, when I received this on Monday evening, a little bit before I went to bed, I woke up later at night because I had made the mistake reading it, and I Googled grandfathering because I always like to say we don't have to recreate something, and I could.
As a grandfather.
And I couldn't find anything, but it did trigger a thought that when we had talked to the consultants we have, communities, when we asked this question, communities do a couple things. When they have new fees that are updated, if they want to continue to support development and investment, they phase in the updated fees, something we're doing here. And maybe, as Alan said, maybe that phasing period takes longer to address. The second thing that they do that I think is incredibly important, that City of Franklin, I've been here almost 18 years, hasn't experienced, is the need to get investment like the majority of other jurisdictions around the country, large and small, some of them. And in those communities, when the economy's impacting investment, the elected officials there either take the fees away or reduce them substantially to try to find that balance to get investment. We haven't had to do that yet. But there are a myriad of communities in Florida I know of that did just that back in 2007 and 2008. Just keep that in mind for this thinking about the simplicity of execution and applying whatever decisions are made. Glenn, please.
I don't, I've lived in this community since '93, been blessed to develop here and get off the road in 2012, and so very thankful to be here, and I appreciate everybody's comments, and I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to have a voice into this. You know, we're not sitting here talking about future or fees going forward yet, but yet there seems to be a mounting concern over fees that are going to be generated by existing projects. When we brought our projects in, did all of our studies that you asked us to do, and then we create impact fees for that, and now, you know, we're sitting in a situation where we have a 300% impact increase on road impact, just experienced 160% on water and sewer, and it sounds like we have more fees going forward. So just on impact fees alone for road impact fees for RM, it's a $21 million impact based on current entitlement. That's what we paid for the land, right? So to Adam's point, in some cases you can make land worthless. I understand what you're saying. People are still coming to this town and are still making investments. And from this point forward, they have to make a decision if they can do that based on whatever fee comes into effect. In the past, fees and fee increase has not been predictable, right? I mean, we haven't done anything on road impact fees for some time. Not our fault as a developer, but, you know, we too suffered through COVID and other things. You know, fees didn't go down through that. You know, we struggle with increase in interest rates, and we're dealing with that on our own. We're big boys. We can handle that. Also, you know, we've made investments in this community that are above and beyond fees, whether it's being asked to build roads that were not our responsibility, or bury, lines underground, or whatever it is, to the tune in just the McEwen corridor, almost $2 million by Southstar. Never argued, because we have an investment in this community and we're proud to be here. And I think the people in this room that are stakeholders in this community want to continue to do that. Going back to the sewer fee, we had broke ground. We had gotten a commitment. We had our loan, and that fee changed while we had started construction, and so we were under the new fees. Our first phase, there's going to be a $2.1 million additional just in sewer on our first 300 apartments. So we get all of that. We're working through that. I'm concerned that, without question, something like this on a project that we've already broke ground on, pipes going on in the ground, and we're just trying to keep it moving forward, it makes it very hard. So are we trying to, you know, my concern is, as you talk about Adam, $41 million, whatever it was, Adam, our 21, Ovation, you know, a handful or well over $200 million pretty quick. I just would like to see some consideration over this grandfathering. I appreciate what Patrick says. It seems like we have enough tools in the tool chest to be able to handle some form of this grandfathering. Again, we hadn't even got to the conversation about, you know, what the fees are going to, and, you know, will those projects be able to pay their way into the future? You know, it seems to me that it's taken us a while to get to this point. I mean, we've worked diligently. I know you guys have worked diligently. The other thing that we haven't seen is we spend a lot of time traveling to where we feel these cities that are some of the best cities out there that we want to emulate in some way. You know, are we understanding how they are able to do their construction projects on their new roads and other things? Embry, who's built 4 projects in this town, looking at about 30 different projects they do, their impact fees as a whole are below $10,000, and they're pushing, you know, over 40 here. So other places are funding it. We've talked about alternatives. I don't know if they will solve it before September the 10th, but for me, and today I have to talk about the project we have underway. This grandfathering is very important to us. It's extremely important to us, especially from our pro forma standpoint.
I'd like to add on to that, because I've seen that. Of course, that project's in my ward, so I've been paying attention to it. And the problem is, when you've got, what I don't want to see is these projects come in there, they move dirt, and then they stop, and we have an empty field of dirt sitting there for years. Or you build buildings, literally, and they're empty. That is a reality, because when you're moving dirt, you've already signed your tenants. You can't go back to those tenants and say, whoops, sorry, now we have to charge you another $3,000 a month because our fees just went up and we can't do anything but charge you more money. And that hairdresser, that CPA, whoever was going to go in that building can't do that anymore. They can't afford those rates. So they lose their tenants, those buildings sit empty, or those lots are bulldozed and we have dirt fields. So that's the concern I look at in my ward and go, wow, how do we fix that? I hear you, Glenn. That's a big problem. It's not sustainable. And then on top of that, we never know when a recession's going to hit, an unforeseen pandemic that we had, even a disaster like a flood. Things impact our community that we have no control over. So whatever we do, we have to make sure that these things are built in so we can deal with them. But this is a problem that I see. You're not alone. Talk to many people who are in that predicament, and we could literally be seeing dirt fields or empty buildings just sit.
Thank you. I'd like to try to get on to the another piece, and I will say this, despite what some people may think. My mind, to the contrary, I work at implementing processes that are trying to be predictable. And what I would say that if there is a desire to address this issue of existing entitled projects, that we look at putting some phasing in of our current fees for a period of time. I know we have different projects in size that have some escalator to it, to those projects. New projects, different. That's where we want to get to. But the existing projects, to try to put a time frame in and a phasing of fees different than what's on the table with the alderman today in ordinance 2023-41. Just think about that. That's kind of the direction we're looking for on the 27th, that we can then work something up that we can share and discuss. Fair enough? Easy to implement. I'm not big on bureaucracy, despite what some people think. So, anyways, for new projects going forward, that there are several here, and again, I've read them multiple times. I just want to get this conversation flowing. In this first one, timing of fee calculation and assessment would be determined when a pre-app is held, the draft fees. Then the final fees would be linked to the FMPC cycle and initial staff response. Not all projects come to fruition even when you get in, if they require a pre-app and get into the FMPC cycle. But that's what has been proposed as far as when the fees would be assessed. Not collected, just assessed. Is that accurate, Rachel, what I stated for A? Not all projects may require a pre-app or, getting into the cycle. Many do, don't get me wrong. So there'd have to be a consideration for those other projects. Anybody want to add that? I know we're cutting up on time, but I just want to make sure that when we bring these forward, if they want to be considered further. Oh, here you go.
I think whether they go to the planning commission or not is not the question. They follow the same submittal cycle. And so I think what we were suggesting is that if it's a site plan, whether it goes to planning commission or not, those fees are established as part of the DRC, if I'm using the right term, feedback that comes back to an applicant. Those fees are established and submitted back to the applicant during that process.
The only thing I would say about that, perhaps, is that it seems like you're asking for that with the first round of staff comments, and I can tell you we have at least a dozen a year that never go past that cycle. It seems like if we want to make things a little more concrete, you would wait at least until we create conditions of approval because we have that, I guess, security in some sense that you're actually going to move forward. Initial submittal seems like we're still baking a project. Just my thoughts on the cycle.
I'd agree with Amy on that, mainly because plans change so much from pre-app until they actually go forward to the Planning Commission. I think if it's linked more to the Planning Commission date, that seems a lot more manageable. The other thing that I really worry about, which I know Vernon can help us work through this, but is who gets involved in the pre-application process that's not in it now to help calculate fees and those types of things. I mean, vesting has thrown our current planners into a total different type of plan review where they're focusing on tracking milestones, tracking vesting, all of these things in addition to just their current plan review. So adding in another layer of tracking and calculating, I think, is something that we will have to address with limited staff resources.
Thank you. Going into B, investing, yes, on projects, we do want the regulations listed on the front page of plans, on the cover page, so we know what version of the regulations we're applying to a project. One of the many reasons why we only endeavor to adopt any changes to our regulations or the effective date of a January 1. So it's easily tracked, sometimes July 1. But on this, talking about the fee would be vested for the life of a project, that's based on the vesting legislation, which was one of the initial proposals, that if it's vested, then it's good for 15 years, essentially. Is that correct? Yeah. Once a project's vested, even if you have the assessment earlier before it's vested, the fee would be good for the vested project because all new projects are vested. Fair enough? All right. Then pricing index, that road impact fees, Paul has identified the highway construction cost index. I don't know if this is similar to that, but it certainly can be looked at.
The National Highway Construction Cost Index would be more appropriate than the bituminous index. We looked at it. It's over 20 years. It's about 5.89% is what that inflation is per year.
Adam has something there. Thank you, Steve.
Sorry for talking so much, but just to clarify a point on points B and C up there, so it's clear for the alderman of what is being requested. So I think what we are suggesting, and everybody's on board with an annual or maybe even biannual update to the index based on the Paul's suggestion. What we don't want to get into a scenario is if Glenn or somebody has started site work and it's a year of site work and then it takes a year to build the building, is that fee change while a project is under construction. So the B is specifically saying that when you have site plan approval, if you start that project, your fee, even though the rest of the fees may be marching forward based on this escalator rate, that you're locked in at the rate that when you started your project, while everything else may be moving forward. Hopefully that makes sense. I just wanted to clarify that.
Is that at site plan approval, or is that at, because just looking at this list, would we not end up with the same problem if it's not? Will we not end up with the same problem that we're in now? I mean, you're just because you've got some projects that are 5-6 years, and they haven't begun site prep, and so it would still be set the 5 years ago rate, or is that C going to be?
Yeah,
C is going to be indexed to the. When I read vesting, I mean, that to me seems like that fee is vested, but you're going to apply that index to that vested schedule that is on the front cover of the thing, and so 2 years down the road, it will go up by that percentage until construction starts? Is that what I'm understanding?
So keep in mind, part 2 of this is all for new projects.
Right,
So if it's on this list that the planning department has, it's not being addressed here, right? So the stuff that you're referring to from Andrew Orr's table or whatever doesn't apply. So I think there would be a scenario where we're talking about site plan approvals, of which you would be, guys, speak up. I don't want to be the only voice in here. Site plan approvals. So in that particular case, and this goes on to Part D here too, of when the fees are collected. Because in some cases, you may have a site plan that's approved, you start construction, but the actual impact as far as when people are occupying the space and using the road is 3 years down the line. And so you may have a fee that goes up 15% during that time period of a 3-year horizon, but you started the project 3 years ago and it's taking you that long to impact the system through there. So again, site plan vesting is what we're talking about.
The index is going to be applied after site plan, or the index is applied before site plan in the vesting? It's applied before, so, right, so you're going to index these fees, whatever the new fee is was set. It will be indexed annually. But if you bring a project in, there's a site plan approval. It's locked in, it's written in black and white, might as well be stone on the front of that front page. And if that project goes 4 years and nothing happens, it's going to be that fee that was in stone. Or, because does that make sense?
If you haven't started a site plan in 4 years, it expires. What's the
Well, we have to.
You have to start your project. I'm just talking to this. You have to start a project, a development plan within 3 years. You have to get one site plan. So the question also is thinking about these multi-phase projects. So you start one site plan in 3 years. Your vesting keeps going. An additional 2 years, you have to go vertical with at least one building on that first site plan. So thinking about vesting, we want to make sure, are we talking about tying costs to individual site plans? And as you know, you get into year 15, well, you get into year 8 of a project, you're at those higher fees, or else we're going to have the same problem. Exactly.
What is being suggested here is just site plan. So again, there is a total reestablishment of fees come January of 2026, whatever your all's implementation date is, and it's going from $100 to $300 or whatever that fee is. That would increase, and everybody on the development team is saying we acknowledge that. So if you have a development plan for a multi-year project, we are talking about the site plans within that. So a site plan would only have a what horizon on a site plan?
Sorry. 3 years.
Talk into the mic.
Yeah.
So that.
So you're locking in for 3 years. And then what happens?
Yeah, you guys, how are your fees?
What happens after the site plan? Or you have to resubmit?
Yeah, if they haven't done anything in 3 years, they have to resubmit the site plan. They could still be vested, but.
Then you'd be at the new index 3 years later, those fees.
Okay.
Something that, yeah.
Because that has a legal
Yeah.
window to us, and I don't think that's. I hear you guys saying something different, so maybe we need to.
And I think that last sentence is where I'm having some issues understanding, because to me, that doesn't suggest that if you expire the 3-year window that the price doesn't change or the impact fee doesn't change. And I think what Patrick is trying to allude to, and I think what I'm probably pretty interested to learn, is that if you get to year 4 or you get to year 2 and you haven't built the project, will we go back and apply the difference from when you first brought the project forward till today? And those 4 years, let's say it's 4 years, there has been an increase in cost. And unless something changes in development or construction, these costs will change over that period of time. I'm comfortable with the 3-year window. If we tell you what it's going to cost and you do what we ask and you build it out of the ground and it takes you 24 months to do it, I'm okay with that margin of difference. I'm not okay if it goes to year 4, year 5, year 6. Yeah.
So a site plan would be approved.
We should just get you.
I think we're saying the same thing. A site plan would be approved. If a site plan expires because Joe Blow hasn't done anything, you're done. Like those fees would recalibrate. Even if you take the same site plan back through, you're no longer on the old fees.
So,
But really what this is meant to try to protect is that multi-year construction project where fees are marching forward while you're under construction.
totally get it. Let me help with that because my mind thinks through a lot of scenarios, and I want to stay away from, we can work it out. But a site plan could have multiple buildings on it. And this is saying, well, once the site plan is approved, you start the first building. If you have 10 buildings on it, it could go 10, 15 years. What I would offer to think about we can publish a schedule. Paul talked about the highway index and the trend. And we can, by ordinance, if the board wants to, say that schedule year over year will be based on the index up to 5%. I'm just throwing that out. So it never exceeds that much because if you remember last time we met, you all look at the cost of materials and you make projections. We're going to make this even the most predictable going forward. It could be for 5 years. We could publish that schedule for 10 years and put it on the site plan, but you'll always know what the fee is going to be. And then the incentive to hit the milestones, and this is for vested projects, is on you all. Whether it takes you 2 years, 10 years, or it impact the economy. I want Bill Squires, who joined us from our law department. He's been waiting.
Good morning, everybody. I want to start by saying, first of all, I am not a decision maker. I'm just listening, taking things in, and sort of formulating some thoughts. I do want to first applaud the idea to think outside of the box, look for solutions, all of that. I do need to add, though, just as a lawyer who's practiced for thousands of years, that anytime I see, almost inevitably throughout my career, anytime I see one set of laws, policies, regulations merged with another set that don't have the same end goal, there are almost always unintended consequences. And I say that to pick up on something that Emily and Amy and Alderman Baggett have touched on, which is I would urge caution for everyone to think about what happens if you tie fee, timing, fee payment, all of that to something strictly like vesting. In other words, or even the submittal schedule. I think what Alderman Baggett picked up on was it doesn't have to be that exactly. You could pick a sort of created time schedule that doesn't tie specifically to that. My concern seeing things that say tie it to vesting or tie it to the submittal schedule. Vesting is a great example. 5 years from now, the legislature has changed the vesting law in some form or fashion. Vesting never thought about fees, right? So when they do that, now all of this discussion gets altered by that one single thing that is outside of our control. Those are the kinds of unintended consequences you can have. So when we're talking about tying all of this to a pre-existing schedule that serves a certain purpose, whether it's vesting, submittal schedules, any of that kind of stuff, bear in mind that sort of framework is not designed to bring into it the consideration of what happens with dollars from fees. And it's kind of what Amy was talking about. You can do this, I think, and y'all are talking about it now, ways without saying specifically tied to vesting. Maybe you're picking a particular milestone or a particular event. I would say exercise some caution in how you approach that because we don't want to be 5 years down the road, some unintended consequence we can't see right now falls into place, and suddenly financial concerns are very different, and we didn't see that coming, right? The idea of predictability kind of goes out the window when that's the case. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
I just wanted to echo what Vernon said is the simplicity of implementing this fee is extremely important for us. Having all these different grandfathering or vesting is going to be really, really confusing. And I just, in my mind, what all these things I'm hearing is predicting that fee farther out in advance is pretty simple to do. The board doesn't necessarily even have to adopt the entire fee if it's too soon. You could phase it in longer periods of time. But from a staff standpoint, and Emily hinted at it too, we would need a lot of additional resources to try to implement some of the things I'm hearing up here. We can certainly do it if that's the way the board ultimately directs us to, but simplicity is going to be key to implementing.
Clarity is predictability's very close cousin. they're in the same vein. So clear, easy process helps with predictability too, not a bunch of different rules for everybody.
So we're over the time. We have some other people waiting, some of us perhaps. I would ask that if you have anything to add, we'll share this memo. We didn't get to the D, but it all relates. Simplicity, clarity, as Eric mentioned. We'll present what we have, what I talked about, what we talked about to the aldermen on the 27th, trying to glean some guidance. Right now, September 10th, public hearing, second reading on ordinance 2023-41 that has a 2 and 3 year implementation with an escalator included. And if the board wants us to add something to that, we will be more than happy to.
Could they share about the collection time really briefly, though, while we're all here? I think that was the next section, right?
Is there anything on the collection? Is there anything on the collection piece that note D? I mean, we're all here. If they want to share some high points on when that is collected, I mean, we're not all going to be together. I don't want to go too much longer, but is there something the development community wanted everyone to hear about the collection?
Let me, let me try to encapsulate it again just to say the course. Now, I had brought up that when the building permit fee is that we collect a percentage. Could be 10, could be 25, whatever. And the balance is collected prior to requesting final inspections. What this says that the fees will be due at the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the tenant. So if you have a multi-tenant building and not all of the spaces are occupied, we'd still be collecting some fees and tracking that. Very onerous. Not to say it can't be done, incredibly onerous.
You're already tracking the COs we just put in a whole new process for tracking CO tenancy COs.
Yes, yeah, yes, we are, but it is onerous at the timing of your collecting the fee. You have to have assessed, and now you're going back, it could be out there for a period of time. Unless the office or retail building is a build to suit, the developer will be pulling a permit for the shell, and the subsequent tenants then would be pulling their own build out of permits. The impact fee should be due at the time of the CO for the individual user. Instead, and who gets charged that fee? Is it, and I'll defer to tenant or Adam, is it the tenant that's going to pay the impact fee, or is it the person building the building? And who gets assessed that fee? Or who's going to pay it? Adam?
I think whoever the building permit applicant is.
All right. So what you're saying is that if a shell building is built.
If a shell building is built and is sitting there vacant, there is no impact on the road. And so what you have adopted in the water and sewer fees, so I'm going to jump over to that just for a second. You're already started this process. So each individual tenant, whether that's retail, they're selling T-shirts, or they're a restaurant washing dishes, your SFU calculations just totally changed how you're calculating water and sewer impact fees based on the use. It's no longer based on meter size, which is great. So somebody will be calculating what the use is for each individual tenant in a space, because each of those uses will have a different impact to water and sewer. That same calculation should be done for roads. We're saying all of these fees should be due at the time of when the impact is hitting the system, which is when that space is occupied. If a vacant building is sitting there, other than maybe fire flows for a fire protection line, there's no impact to the city of Franklin's systems.
All right, and that's good. And again, with any of these, we want to think it through. But we just, the board, approved an amendment that was brought forth by building owners about how we calculate the occupancy load on buildings, primarily office buildings, but all buildings. Because we have multiple tenants occupying a single floor in an office building. So whether or not they're getting all certificates of use and occupancy is to be determined, but you could have somebody occupy a small portion of a floor in an office building that, okay, maybe we do collect an impact fee, but it's a fraction of what should be collected on that building, and we might not even find that out until after the fact. And then we'll say, well, we can't, now we're going to collect some impact fees. And when are those impact fees collected? Just this one scenario that we'll figure it out, but there's ramifications to it. Instead of collecting it like other jurisdictions, what's the intended use of the building? And then we'll collect the fee when it's ready to be occupied. Hopefully that helps. All right? Thank you.
One last question. Is there an opportunity for some of the NAIOP home builders and development professionals to sit down with staff to work on a more concise version of this based on all the feedback that we've heard today from BOMA, so that you guys have a cleaned up version of this to present next week or whenever the
Well, I would
meeting is?
suggest, there certainly always is. Invite that opportunity, particularly if John's invited. Have him come. I couldn't help, John. Thanks for being here today. But I think it'd be prudent, and we're not going to be able to do it before next Tuesday, to get some guidance from the board of what they're thinking about based on the ones we had already talked about and this list here, and then have that meeting. We're not going to get us together before Tuesday and solidify something.
Well, then we're not gonna make any decisions on Tuesday. So.
You just get some guidance on, let's look at the grandfathering.
But I would, let's just, we need to have this cleaned up, because if we're just gonna have the same conversation we had today, if there's not something else to digest after today. I mean, it will be
I
the
would
same.
I would echo what Alderman Baggett's going to say. This is a priority for our city and for the development community here. If the developing community is willing to get together between now and next Tuesday, that would allow us to make decisions with real information. Right now, this is a draft, and I don't feel like I can make a good comments to represent our citizens in this decision if we don't have better shaping of this document. At least section 2. The first part, the grandfathering piece, we can address, but
There's parts of this that will take a longer time, but I think to have more.
Well, we can, keep in mind, I know this is a priority, and we'll do whatever. I mean, we've got a planning commission meeting coming up, and the time to dive in, I would ask that the NIAP group submit something again.
Yeah, but they need to get together staff.
Yeah, and September 10th is a date that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen could certainly defer. But, you know, we want, and the implementation was to provide predictability to January 1. But go ahead and do that, and we'll try to capture a time to get together. But I just think it's.
Yeah.
There's been a ton of momentum that's going in
Is
the
this
right
on?
direction.
It's still-
We just want to continue to build upon that so that everybody's got the tools that they need to keep moving forward.
We don't have to, give us something to react to.
Well, yeah, but that's like batting a cat around the room, you know? I'm just like with a ball. And it's like, that's why I think your suggestion is right on, because you want to vet those things out to bring us something that if we bat the ball around, then it's like, okay, and if you all get together with staff and work some of these things out, maybe not everything, but at least one or two of these items, I think if not, I'm not going to discuss it. I'm going to defer it on my own. Whether people agree with me or not, I can't talk about it because it's like the cart before the horse, in my opinion. And I don't want that. I don't want to waste the time talking about it and then having it come back and having things change. It's fruitless to me. I just don't
How
like
about,
that.
Rachel, give
I
me
don't
a
like that
list of
scenario.
who you want to attend as a representative of NIAP. Then I'll talk to our colleagues and Eric, who he'd want in that meeting, and we'll look at our schedules and do the best we can.
Yeah.
Fair enough?
That sounds good, especially since it feels like some of it is just, we all like the idea, it's just different language. We need to tweak the language, so we need to make sure the language we're using is the same language you all would want to be using. So, we can chat later today, Vernon, and
Yeah, let me
figure
know.
out a
I'm
time.
thinking we need a half a day at least. I mean, we could, to get through some of these details, right? I think at least that long. Yeah.
No, but they can come prepared.
Some of the things that are not, I mean, grandfather's not be taken care of in an hour, for sure, right? But I think, bring some of the commonality, like just focus on the things that I think everyone kind of was kind of consensus on. That would even be helpful.
Yeah, so commonalities bring to us.
It doesn't have to
That,
be 100%
you know,
fleshed out, but give us some.
Well, it sounds like Rachel and Adam, you can take the notes you took today, put them on a piece of paper, and give them to Vernon and be like, yes, is this what we heard? Right.
Yeah, to give us a head start. I had asked, to get this so we could put some semblance to it. And again, timing it's hard. Rachel got it to me at 8:35 at night. I read it before I went to bed. But I couldn't react to it, and we exchanged a couple emails yesterday. We just need the time. It's an important decision. So get something, get me that list, and I'll get something set up. Thank you all.